Also, I don't usually ever do any sort of intro. I usually just do stuff like, this is Unfuck the Poor, and now we're going to start the podcast. Today's episode is Mental Health Monday. We're back. You missed us. We missed you. Okay, this intro I actually wrote months ago when I planned to bring the podcast back in October. Obviously, I came back sooner, but October of 2022 is the last time that I actually did this podcast before, the most recent episodes. And I apologize for having been away for so long, especially as the podcast was picking up steam. We actually hit 1,000 listens. That's amazing considering I have zero plan and zero schedule, and in my opinion, a strange voice. But I have been gone a long time for reasons. And that's the whole point of today's episode. So today we're going to talk about mental health. And to talk about mental health with me, I have a dear friend and colleague, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Who the fuck are you?
Oh, shucks. You called me a friend.
Nah, I thought I called you a colleague.
You did. You did call me a colleague.
Oh, good.
So I appreciate that.
Okay.
So, as Joseph said, my name's Luke, and I'm his coworker.
Yeah, we work in the same office. So, Luke, how is your mental health?
To be quite frank, pretty bad. It definitely hasn't been the best as of late. And that is completely and utterly self-induced.
I'm gonna take a detour from the script real quick. What do you mean it's self-induced?
Yeah, I should be in therapy, but life, quote unquote, got in the way.
We did talk about this actually. Yeah, you have really neglected your mental health. You have. When was the last time you went and saw your therapist?
I'm horrified to tell you this again. And you're making me tell you this again.
I am.
July of last year.
July of 2022. Okay, so I think I got on to you about this. I see my psychiatrist every 2 months, and that's great for me. He does medication management. I can also request like a therapy session as well. Usually my sessions last 5 to 10 minutes. He checks in with me and I check in with him. And one of the things that we always go over is sobriety, because this is where we're going to start with this episode. Is I've been alive and sober now for 5 years, and we're going to get into that. And trigger warning: this episode talks about suicide a lot. So Luke, you probably weren't expecting that. But to get back to your point, I think it would be a good idea for you to see your therapist soon. Give him or her a call. Just check in.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. That or get with a new one of the two.
So the reason, Luke, that I took a lot of time off, nearly a year, October of 2022, the reason I took so much time off is because I get really into this podcast. I love diving deep into subjects and looking up facts and figures and reading the news and making sense of it and considering how the world out there affects each and every one of us. And I love doing it in a way that acknowledges the absurdity of life on this planet. We pay to live here. We're born into a system where living isn't just possible, man. You have to pay to eat, pay to live in a house or apartment, pay to get fixed if you're injured and treated if you're sick. And if you can't afford any of that, Luke, you are shit out of luck. We didn't agree to this system, but here we are. And because we certainly didn't design this system, it doesn't work for us. But it does work for the people who designed it. We got into all of that in the book Unfuck the Poor. But yes, this is depressing as hell. And when I wrote the book Unfuck the Poor, which is the first season of this podcast, the nonfiction economics book that I turned into this podcast that I know 10 of you have listened to all the way through, it always surprised me time and again when the reason for literally any of our political and social structures somehow always boiled down to the lopsided shitbox economy that we are forced to participate in. Always take, for example, the busing of migrants from the U.S. border down to a Foxconn factory in Mexico. Those migrants didn't come from the city where the Foxconn plant was located, but that's where they wound up with no money. And guess who was hiring day laborers? Foxconn. And when Yahoo.com suffered 2 data breaches in the mid-2000s, guess where a crazy stream of pro-bank merger emails directed at the Department of Treasury came from? all yahoo.com email addresses, all of them. And of course, when Ron DeSantis makes it illegal to be in the car with an undocumented worker, guess what happens to the Florida economy? It crashes. All that migrant labor flees. They didn't repeal jack shit. They fucked themselves. But money talks sometimes. Now, I say all of that because we've been going through an onslaught of news lately. Luke, the thing that is on my mind the most these days, other than work, because obviously I care deeply about our job, the thing that's on my mind most these days is the issue, the slaughter of Palestinians, specifically in the Gaza Strip, by the Israeli military. That is horrifying. And with this podcast, I could focus daily on the death toll in Gaza. And this is what I did with the Ukraine war. Every day I would write out a script, a brief outline of the day's news, and I would count death tolls, accounts of rape of women by Russian soldiers, troop advancements through Ukraine. I really got into it, and it took a huge toll on my mental health. And that is why I stopped doing this podcast for nearly a year. And as the date, October 20th, 2023 closed in, I realized it's been almost a year. I've been alive for so long, and I started a podcast. It's time to get back to it. And this was actually the first episode that I was going to do when I came back to the podcast, because I thought I really need to explain why my mental health kept me from doing this podcast for nearly a year. And the reason is because I get so into it. And because I get so into it, I internalize a lot of that news. It really gets to me. And I got really tired of talking about the Ukrainian war. So I don't do it anymore. I don't even look at the news about it. And then Israel invaded Palestine, Israel invaded Gaza after the October 7th attack. After the October 7th attack by Hamas militants on Israel. How have you been this last year? We've worked together for how long?
June will be 3 years, I think.
June will be 3 years. So in the last year, because you knew I was doing the podcast a year ago.
Oh, yeah. I've known since pretty much we started, just shortly after we started working together when you started talking about your book.
Yeah. And admittedly, you were a good friend and colleague, and I believe you listened to it some back then.
I remember when we first started, you told me about your book, and I used to listen to it while I ran.
And I appreciate you doing that. And the last year, since October of 22, everything has been depressing. And at first I was taking a break because I felt like I needed to recover after the abortion redux episode. I don't know if you listened to that one. It's a long, extended episode all about abortion bans and the actual facts behind abortion in the United States. I don't know if you recall that one.
So I believe I did. I want to say I was listening to that while I was backpacking. Let me check what I downloaded on Spotify real quick.
Sure. As you do that, I'm going to get back into my script. So as many of you know, I have a daughter. She's appeared on this podcast a few times. And the reality of living in a state, Tennessee, where abortion essentially became illegal, that hit pretty hard. Navigating the raising of any child is difficult, and raising a daughter as the kind of father who would do anything to keep his kids safe, it felt like all of a sudden it was me against the red tide of assholes washing over the sanity of this nation. And then they started legislating against trans folk, and then there were boycotts, and then the wildfires started, and then the war in Ukraine, which we were so invested in, just kept dragging on. It reached a year. It reached 500 days. It reached the point of the U.S. declaring its intent to send cluster munitions to Ukraine. We did a whole episode on why cluster bombs were crimes against humanity. This whole thing is fucking insane. And now, apparently, we're watching Gazan children die. These are all digressions, and this is how my brain works, one tragedy to another. I just kept taking time off because the news cycle was relentlessly horrible, and I felt like I just needed to breathe. So I did breathe a lot in my sleep. The last several months have been highlighted by very few good things. My daughter had her birthday. I went to a concert with my wife. I had my birthday. The rest of the time I napped, I was exhausted, and I made pizza. I gained weight. I made more pizza. I napped more. I stopped reading the news. I started my 8th, ninth, and 10th playthroughs of Fallout 4. I started downloading and using Fallout mods. And I kept making pizza. See, my mother... I'm not even going to tell you the pizza story. Luke, I
know the pizza story. I think you covered it with Kenny.
I did. And Luke, I made you some pizza dough, and I gave you very detailed instructions on how to make pizza. How did your pizza turn out?
It turned out pretty well, if I remember right.
I'm fairly certain you fucked it up somehow.
No, 100%, without a doubt.
Did you follow the drawings that I gave you?
I'm pretty sure, and I need to emphasize that's in air quotes. Pretty sure.
Yeah, because I drew very detailed diagrams of how to make a pizza.
I think I actually kept the ingredient list and how to do it. It's somewhere in my apartment.
Good. I definitely measured the thickness of the dough precisely and drew it to scale on the paper.
Did you do a section cut?
Yes. I gave you a spec sheet on pizza.
Type of flour and everything?
No, probably not.
Yeah, I see. That's where you fucked up.
So then I napped, and then I played Fallout, and then I wrote a novel, and then I napped some more. I was exhausted and depressed, and even writing the novel, which was an absolute blast and was done on time and edited happily and even submitted to agents and publishers, that wasn't enough to lift me out of depression. So I spent half a year in basically a deep depression. Frustrated with work, feeling like I was going nowhere in life, basically just feeling aimless and drifting. And depression is not new to me. My official diagnosis is major depressive disorder with a little bit of mania and psychosis mixed in there. In my darkest, deepest depression, I was delusional and out of touch with reality. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because even though you hear this voice and I'm all sardonic and chipper, beneath the surface, I am a wreck of a man. And today we're going to explore that. But first, Luke, do you have any diagnoses?
So in college, I was diagnosed with, I guess you could consider it mild anxiety, mainly revolving around public speaking, test, performance anxiety, stuff like that. Then I think it was summer 21, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
How did that diagnosis come about?
Well, if I remember right, March of 21, or no, it was it was a year before that, so 20, not 21. March of 20, I think we all went on lockdown, I want to say, it was with COVID, so the company I was working for at the time went remote. So we were managing all these construction projects all across the state. Doing that remote from 400 miles away over like 90 different buildings is not easy. So I was working like 60 hours a week, holed up in my parents' place, left Cincinnati, that kind of thing. So I was pulled out of my friend group, and that all came to a head when I was driving down the interstate and sat there and kind of realized, if I drove off the road, I don't have to go to work.
You know what that's called, other than suicidal ideation?
A breakthrough.
Well, I was going to say that's called the call of the void. Like when you approach like a roof, like say a really high roof, and you are on the edge and you have this like just deep, bizarre desire to jump off, even if you're not feeling suicidal.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. We have this fascination as humans with death, and it's fascinating how just our natural morbid curiosity as living, breathing humans, how much that is intertwined with our mental health. Because so I have major depressive disorder, and one of the breakthroughs that I've had in therapy was you can think about depression as an intense focus on the past, and anxiety is an intense focus on the future. And the reason that humans are inclined to reflect, you know, when you've done something really cringeworthy in your life, and then like 10 years later you think about it, and it still makes you sick to your stomach that you did something gross. Cringy.
So like most of my life.
Most of my life too. The reason we do that, it's a survival instinct. We know that we should never do that again, because it is, but you do it again, don't you?
Yeah.
It's just an unbroken cycle of cringe.
I'm just a cringy person, man.
Me too. So we're gonna get a little bit more into that. But let me ask you this: as a kid, were there any signs or behaviors that you had growing up that indicated your future diagnosis or diagnoses with mild anxiety and then later bipolar disorder?
To be honest, I don't necessarily think so. From the outside, I had a pretty happy childhood. Had a decent bit of friends. Overall, was a happy child. Had a lot of extracurricular activities, so on and so forth. You know, the standard, oh, they look like a happy child type deal. So from the outside looking in, no. I always dealt with a lot of stress and how to manage that. And a lot of that was self-inflicted, if that makes sense. Kind of how you put too much pressure on yourself.
Are you an overachiever?
No, but both my parents and my sister set the bar pretty high. So
family pressure. Did you?
They didn't tell me, hey, you have to meet this goal, or hey, you have to do this. I mean, like, for example, ACT. Dad had a 34, sister had a 32, mom had a 29. They didn't say you have to do this. But you know damn well when I got that 23 rolling in, they were like, damn, this kid's dumb as shit.
I was about to ask, but you know what I got?
19.
I got a 24.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Average. Just straight up average.
And the issue is, for the first couple of years of school, I did not give a shit until a coach said, you need to get it together unless you want to get kicked off varsity golf.
Coach as in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, my high school coach was an absolute batshit crazy man.
But I assume all high school coaches are not normal people.
No. That's not this guy. This guy was, he was a football and basketball coach as a golf coach. Him and I got into a screaming match on the course one day.
About what? What in golf makes anyone angry?
So he was just an angry person in general. Just in certain ways you go about your course management, how you play the hole.
This is why I will never pick up a golf club. I cannot imagine having a conversation where you have to say, "Whoa, how'd you play your hole?" I don't fucking know. The hole's over there. I swung at it. I fucking missed. Every once in a while, you get really fucking lucky and make a hole in one, and everybody thinks you're really good. Listen, holes in one, they are not from skill. That is pure fucking luck.
Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah. No, we're gonna stop the golf talk right there. I'm about to get angry. This is why people hate golf.
I thought this is what you were about to say. This is why people hate you.
this is why people get pissed off during golf. It makes no fucking sense.
No, but it ended in "fuck you, eat shit," and he drove away in his golf cart.
He was yelling at you from the golf cart.
No, he was on the tee box with me.
And then he left you in the tee box. Wow.
Oh, that's not the only time that happened either.
This sounds like a horrible man. Golf sounds like the worst sport to be a part of.
You like that tangent?
That was a good tangent. So not direct family pressure, but definitely it sounds like you were in a household of high performing. I don't know if they're overachievers. Are they overachievers? They're high performing.
I wouldn't necessarily say they're overachievers. Sister was, what is that thing in high school where you, merit scholar or whatever it is?
I have no idea.
I don't know, but she made some scholastic achievement thing. You have good grades. Do all these extracurricular activities, and you get put on some national registry, whatever it is.
Yeah, the National Merit Scholar thing.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I never was at risk of being that ever.
Yeah, neither was I.
We'll move on. No real indication of anxiety or depression as a child. Pretty normal childhood.
Yeah.
I had a pretty normal childhood as well until 7th grade. And my diagnosis has always been depression, at least since I was 12. Something snapped between 6th and 7th grade that made I would call myself a happy, funny, energetic, and somewhat chaotic kid. Something between 6th and 7th grade turned that kid into a sulking, quiet, anxious shell of a person. I don't know if it was puberty or if it was suddenly that school required effort. was possibly the change in social dynamics. The 6th and 7th grades are when kids start examining and exploring their personalities and friend groups, lots of internal changes that reflect back to them a different reality, a reality that hadn't existed before, one in which they are suddenly the protagonist in a story that is being written each and every day. And I was not ready for that. I liked being a kid. I did not like the process of becoming an adolescent or an adult. So the depression from age 12 did not get any better. I skipped a lot of school when I was in high school. I didn't care about my GPA or doing particularly well in any subject. When I was a junior in high school, I struggled through what is now one of my favorite subjects, history. I nearly failed it. I never did well in math or chemistry, and I even struggled in gym class. Listen, Luke, I'm going to tell you this story. I do not like sports. Even though I was a college,
trust me, I'm aware.
Even though I was a college athlete.
I forgot you were a cyclist.
I got a scholarship.
Were you a mountain biker or a cyclist? Well, or a road cyclist?
Mountain, road, and cyclocross, and I got a scholarship for it.
Yeah, I don't even know how that happened, to be quite honest.
But it did.
When you told me you did that, I was kind of taken aback, to be quite honest.
I have my jersey framed at the top of the stairs.
Oh boy, I'm going to have to go to the top of the stairs and see that.
Because you can see it from the bottom.
I'm not allowed to go up top.
But I did it. At first, I just wore the jersey after school, after I left, because I was like, it's a free jersey. And then I realized, like, I actually went through hell that 1 year that I was a college athlete. And so now it's like my trophy. But in gym class, freshman year, we had to do football drills. And one of the things
football drills?
Yeah.
Even though you weren't in football?
Yep.
Like, what were you doing? Like ladders and shit, or what?
Well, there was like, you have to practice. This is how bad I am at sports. I don't even know what it's called. Like, when they do the X's and the O's and they have like the dashed lines, like.
Are you talking about like plays?
Yeah, we had to do those. They would have us do like a hook and something else. I don't know, but they would make us do it. And they also, they would set up like, this is separate, but for basketball, they would set up like the what is it, jump shot?
Are you talking about layup?
Layup, that's it. They would have you set.
This is bad.
I don't know anything about sports.
I don't either, and I know these.
They had 3 lines. You would stand in 3 lines, and it was like one line passed to the other, and then you would do the layup, and then the third line would go and catch it, and you would pass. And it was like this intricate, like you had to go to these stations, and I could not wrap my head around it, and I would just stood at the back of the line and never did this drill. So football, they do this thing where you're on one side of the gym court.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a gym court? Basketball court.
Gymnasium, maybe? Yeah. I don't know.
You're on one side of the gymnasium, and you have to run to the other. And they actually they had one of the quarterbacks, like a junior varsity something quarterback or whatever, in there, and they would throw the ball while you're running, and you have to, like, you're running away from the ball, and they throw it, and you have to like look behind and like catch it, right?
I'm seeing just so many kids eat absolute and utter shit right now.
No,
in my mind,
no one did.
What?
No one did.
How?
Except me.
Thank God.
I'm the only one.
Good.
And guess what?
You broke your nose.
Because I really didn't want to do it. I was the very last person to go. So everybody who had just successfully done it watched me trip over my own legs and fall flat on my face.
Did you break your nose?
No, I did not.
Dang it.
So also I did not do well in school. In short, the only classes I liked were English and art. Being alone to create and read and write made me feel safe and competent. I was productive, and the work I did felt like it had value, if not to the world, then at least to myself. I was capable of imagining things and making them happen. I also never had a plan for college. I did not take the SAT. I did take the ACT, and I scored abysmally on it. I didn't apply to schools until my senior.
Better than me.
By a point. I don't even want to talk about.
That would have been great in my parents' eyes.
I don't even want to talk about the ACT grade. I don't know why is a 30 something good? That's not a grading scale. Because
it tells how good you are at taking a test.
The
material's not difficult. It's how well you can perform under pressure.
Let's see how our high school experiences differed. I did not apply to schools until my senior year of high school. Mm-hmm. I did not care where I went to college because I didn't want to go. I hated school. I had no plan to go to college, and I did not even realize that all of my friends had actually been planning for this for the last like 3 or 4 years. I had no idea.
Did your mom not push you or anything?
No.
Okay.
And which is funny because she has 2 master's degrees.
That's kind of why I was surprised when you said you didn't do any planning at all, because
no, none.
she's a pretty decorated.
Yeah, she's
person.
smart. She is a very smart. Now, here another thing. She went back to school when I was in 8th or 9th grade. She went to Vanderbilt. And this was also when I was really depressed. I did not want to go to school. So sometimes when I didn't go to high school, I would go with her to Vanderbilt campus, and I would sit in on her theology classes with her, because she has a master's in divinity, and she would let me come with her and sit in class.
That's kind of surprising.
And I thought it was fascinating. It at least opened my eyes to the possibility that there were subjects out there that I could study that were actually interesting and engaging, unlike what I was getting in high school. So how far ahead did you plan for college?
Well, I remember in 3rd grade, I had a really good friend, and him and I were talking about, it was like, oh, we're going to go to UK together. Oh, we're going to stay in the same dorm. We're going to be roommates. So it had always been kind of discussed that college was going to be a thing. It was never really written down or like formally said, but it was always kind of assumed, if that makes sense, because grandfather went to college, grandfather went to college, both my parents went to college. Dad has a law degree, mom's a nurse, and my sister went to college. So it was assumed, Luke, you're going to go to college.
So going back my family's academic history, my grandmother graduated high school. My grandfather did not. I don't think that my father's mother, I don't think she graduated high school, but my step-grandfather, Neil White, he was accepted into Juilliard to play trumpet.
Big trumpet guy.
He only went for 1 year, and he did not stay because it was too cold. This man...
Valves got stuck, eh?
This man was good enough to get into fucking Juilliard. And he was like, nah, New York's cold.
It's like, this weather sucks.
I'm going back home to Texas.
Not doing it today.
No, fuck it. He got a job at a bank. Well, actually, it doesn't. We're not going to get... He was actually very smart, but that's beside the point.
I think that's the biggest thing is in today, today is a lot better than it used to be. Is people connected intelligence and ability to your degree. And now people are realizing that some of the smartest people, they don't have degrees. They don't have all these accolades behind their name. They're just diligent.
My grandfather was once audited by the IRS. He had a beer store. And
I remember you telling me this.
And he again did not graduate high school. He dropped out when he was 16 or 15 or something to work for his parents. And he joined the military later, like in his 30s. He served in World War II in a storage warehouse in the Caribbean.
I remember you telling me this.
He had like a 4-year vacation, but he learned bookkeeping from the military. And when he was audited by the IRS, the auditor actually told him he had the best kept books of anybody he had. The IRS got to him, and they were just like, "Oh shit, we're screwed. We got nothing. This guy's clean." Which is interesting because he was Sicilian, and he definitely could have had mob connections, but his books were clean. So my mother graduated college. She was like the first, basically, of her family to graduate college. My aunt graduated. My other aunt and uncle both dropped out. My father went to college but never graduated. So it was never really expected that we were gonna go to college. But my mom was like, well, if you want a good job, you should go to college. And I had a friend whose dad always told me, if you're not going to go to college, become an electrician.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to touch electricity.
But it's funny that you say in 3rd grade, you and your friend were talking about this, because in 5th grade or 4th grade, my friend Artie Hand and I had a conversation about this. We were talking about college, and he was like, I'm not going to college. And I was like, I guess I won't go to college either. He was like, I might work construction. And I was like, whoa, the alternative to not going to college is construction? I was like, I'm never going to work construction. And
construction's way too hard. It's dirty. It's messy. I mean, like shit.
But Luke, where do we work?
In construction.
We work in construction. So here you go. We both went to college. We both went to fucking college, and we still wound up working in construction. Okay. So I had no plan. I did not apply to college until my senior year, and I applied to, I think, 3 schools. One was Emory University, which I had no chance of getting into.
I like Emory.
Yeah, but I had no chance of getting in there. None. 0. You have to have good grades to go to Emory.
And a more importantly, good ACT score.
Yeah, and I assume you have to take the SAT to get in there. I forget the other college I applied to, but a third one, St. John's College.
Where's St. John's?
St. John's actually has 2 campuses. One is in Annapolis, Maryland, and the other is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is an interesting school. It's called the Great Book School because they don't have a typical curriculum. What they do is they basically study all of the great books of literature from the Greeks, the science of the Greeks to the Bible to the Quran, hundreds of books on their syllabus. And I applied to the New Mexico campus because I love the desert, and I was 100% right. The Santa Fe St. John's campus is beautiful.
You learned from your great grandfather you needed to go to the heat.
I did. I needed to go to the heat. So I applied. I got accepted. I wrote a really good essay, and that's why I got accepted. I'm okay at writing. I got accepted. I was actually very excited about it. I thought it was very interesting. I hadn't planned on it, and all of a sudden, I go to St. John's, and this is where I have my first mental breakdown. 3 days into my St. John's experience, I dropped out. I packed up all my shit and mailed it to my mother's house in North Carolina, and I got the cheapest multiple layover plane ticket I could afford, and I got the fuck out of the desert.
You never told me this.
No, I'm telling you now. You had no idea what to expect coming in, and you're learning the entire sad history.
I would like to point out he gave me 0 prep for this episode.
Yep. Which, by the way, my other guests, I've given them scripts ahead of time, and even my friend Ash, he is the one that came up with the episode and gave me the outline. So,
thanks, Ash.
Yeah. So here's where I based this off of. College was too expensive. I was going to be at least $100,000 in debt, and for what? A degree that said I read all the classic literature ever written. For a small college, there were too many people and personalities, and I did not know how to fit in. And yes, after 3 days, that was how I felt, like an outcast already. And I had struggled with the first reading assignment. I read it, and I reread it, and I reread it. It was a short story, which I'll think of halfway through this episode, but I can't remember it right now. I could not absorb it. I couldn't do it. And I had whether you want to call it a panic attack, mental break, whatever, I got out of there. Then the next year I spent with my mother in North Carolina, and basically what I did was I read and I wrote all by myself. I did not have a job for a while. I cleaned my mother's apartment and cooked meals because I really just wanted to be alone. I spent a lot of time exercising because I didn't have anything else to do. Actually, I got a job with my who would become my stepfather. He was an ex-convict, and for a while he was my best friend. He was
before or during your mother's relationship with him?
Both. Yeah.
So you're the reason your mother met him.
No, he met her through church, where she was like an intern pastor, and his mother went there, and he had, I think, just moved back in with her. He had just gotten out of prison again, like the second time, and he moved back in with her. Let me explain to you my stepfather, Mark, for whom I have an unending amount of compassion and love for, because he is just, I love him dearly to this day. My mother does too. Terrible alcoholic, could not get his shit together, but just an amazing person. He did not go to college. After high school, he got into selling drugs.
Oh, damn.
He got into selling drugs. And I don't mean just like a little drugs.
You're talking about cartel level?
He got into cartel level drug shit.
Oh, no.
And drugs weren't enough. He was importing, he was quote unquote importing probably more marijuana than most people can fathom. And then that turned into cocaine. And marijuana and cocaine eventually turned into weapons. So he was eventually arrested on racketeering charges.
That's all they could get him on?
Yeah. They got him on RICO charges because they never caught him like with any of the stuff. They caught him with money, and they basically knew what he was doing, but they never could pin him in a room with drugs. They got him with weapons, but not a whole stockpile of weapons. I think he had like an illegal gun, and they got him for smuggling that. So he was arrested for this sometime in the 80s, and he spent 9 years in a federal penitentiary.
That's all.
He got paroled. But the story of him getting arrested is actually pretty interesting. So he was in town to visit his mother because he was on the run from the cops. He was on the run from the DEA.
The one place you don't go.
Yeah. He went to see his mother, and she was like, "Oh, what are you doing back?" And he's like, "Well, I'm, just here to visit and live in your attic for a while."
Was the DEA watching her house?
Yes.
I would hope so.
They were. And the thing is, they had even been there to her house before he showed up and was like, "Listen, we're looking for your son." And she was like, "Okay." And somehow they found him. Obviously, she turned him in. Like, obviously.
Oh, she turned him in?
Obviously. He doesn't believe this. But as soon as he told me like this sort of turn of events, I was like, "Oh, your mother turned you in for sure." Because she is a very sweet lady.
I was expecting her to tell the FBI to go pound sand.
No, she was the most remarkably sweet woman I've ever met. Like, nicer. I mean, seriously, nicer than anybody I've ever met. Just a sweet little old lady. But here's what happens. They find him at her house and they arrest him. And then they're, because it's the DEA, they're going to fly him back to whatever jurisdiction, not North Carolina. And they're in the airport, and he tries to escape.
I'm just imagining this now.
But he was in handcuffs.
Are you talking about like a public? You're talking about like public
he
airport,
was at a
not
public
military
fucking
or
airport.
anything.
No, public air, because that's how they transport prisoners. They put them on commercial flights.
Man, good job, DEA.
Yeah. So they try, and he runs through the airport in handcuffs, trying to escape. He has no plan, and they eventually he evades them like briefly, and then obviously like security, they get him and they arrest him.
Checkpoint.
Yeah. So eventually they get him in there and they arrest him and all that, and he goes to jail. And in jail, they have the rehabilitation programs where they teach you federal prison, where they teach you a trade. And the trade that my stepfather learned in prison was industrial valve repair. Do you know what that is? We actually don't have any on campus.
That I find that hard to believe. Are you 100% sure of this?
Yes, I have looked. Ever since I learned what this was, we do have large valves on campus.
Got big valves.
But we do not have, we have manual valves that you turn by hand.
Sure, these like pressure-based valves?
Yeah.
Like pressure release valves?
These are huge steam valves that have actuators on them. They're all self-contained, and basically they're used in an industrial process, huge industrial processes. And what he worked for a lot was tobacco companies, because this was North Carolina and Virginia. And so he learned how to tear them all down, rebuild them, and this was like the skill that he learned. And side note, when he was released from prison, the reason he was arrested again is because he threatened a police officer.
It was the second or third time.
The second time. He was out on parole, and he had a gun he wasn't supposed to have because, federal prisoner, not allowed to have a gun, and he had one. And he threatened a cop with it. When he was
sure, yeah, let's just get away with that.
When he was working on his motorcycle, and so, I don't know how he got out. He also assaulted a DA,
assaulted a district attorney
from inside a jail cell. Pulled him into the bars. Very violent man.
This guy sounds interesting. I want to meet him.
Violent to authority, not violent to me or my mother. I just want to put the man was a rough around the edges, but also he smoked like a chimney.
2 or 3 packs a day.
Oh yes, however many he wanted, just all the, and also
here's a carton a week. Or here's 2 cartons a week. Have fun.
I'm only 2 pages. I can't even get through this. So also he was a terrible drunk. And there was one
This
time
guy had all the
Yeah.
vices.
he was trying to clear out some property. They owned like half an acre and it was wooded, and he was going to like clear it so they could build a house. And he's in a Bobcat, and
Oh God.
I'm up at the house, and I just see this tree, the top of this tree like swaying, okay? And it's like that's all that's one tree just going. And I hear the Bobcat, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go see what Mark's up to. I go down there, and he's got the Bobcat. It's not on tracks. It has the 4 wheels. And he has gotten the Bobcat stuck. 2 of the wheels, there is a tree between 2 of the wheels on the side. And it's just spinning around as he is trying to get it out. He cannot get it out. And I go down there and I see him, and he's like, I need you to get the truck. We got to pull it out. And he like opens the cab and steps out, and this bottle of whiskey falls out that was between his legs, and it was obliterated. There was like maybe 2 swigs left. The man had drunk the entire thing trying to clear this land. So
Yeah, it's the only way to do it on your own land.
he was an interesting guy. So he learned industrial valve repair. And while I was in North Carolina living with my mom, I got this idea that I wanted to get back into cycling because I'd gotten into it in high school, and I really enjoyed it. It's like the one form of physical activity that I can just do it for hours. And I wanted a new bike, and I wanted to start racing bikes. And so I worked for Mark for several months. But the first month that I worked for him, I worked hard, and I was repairing industrial valves with him. And that involved, there are a lot of steps involved. He would break them down, and they basically have these really specific metal alloys they're not just steel or aluminum or titanium. They're specific alloys for high pressure steam valve systems. Mm-hmm. And they are expensive. Like one single valve costs several $100s, and they are no bigger than a golf ball. And what he would do is he would fill his pickup truck, just a regular F-150 pickup. He would fill them with these valves. He would go in, he would tear all these valves out, fill his truck with them, and then he would bring them back to his mother's garage and strip them and lay out all the pieces, and he would sand and repaint all the bodies, and then he would lap the valves on a lathe with cutting compound and like the wire mesh type sandpaper, and he taught me how to do that. And because when these steam valves, when they seat, what happens is that they wind up wearing out where the valve meets the open pipe.
Like so housing.
Yeah. And so you wind up with like this ring, and since they're from tobacco, a lot of them are from tobacco warehouses. Yep. They're covered in tobacco. And so what happens is they wind up leaking, and so you have to lap the valves. Mm-hmm. And I think he was impressed with how diligently I worked, because I'll just get into a job and I'll just work until it's done. And I sat on this cold concrete floor like for an entire month, painting these bodies. I stood at the lathe. I sandblasted everything. I mean, I did all this stuff. He taught me how to do this. And that first month, I think he paid me like $1,000. And the first thing I did, I went out and I bought a mountain bike, and I started riding it all the time. And that was, that's where I went with that.
Was that your first mountain bike?
That was my first actual like real life nice mountain bike. It was a Trek 6700. It was their entry level race bike.
Okay.
6700 doesn't mean anything. It was just it was a nice Trek. It was the first.
My first one was Trek.
It was the first nice bike that I ever bought. And actually, Mark would go on to buy me my first road bike, and he paid $600 cash for it. Right here in Nashville. He just pulled out $600 and was like, "Here you go."
$600. What was that back in?
That would have been 2004, 2005.
So that was like
it was a good chunk of change.
$800-900 road bike now.
Yeah. It was super cool. I spent that year reading and writing, and I bought the mountain bike, and I started doing endurance races. I kept reading and writing, and the summer before I turned 19, I had my first short story accepted for publication. Hey. And that was like vindication for extracting myself from society. I accomplished the one thing that I wanted to accomplish, publication. And you might be wondering why I am telling you all of this, Luke.
It's your life story.
It is my life story, but I'm telling you this because this whole time, like even as I'm exercising, even as I'm doing exactly what I want to do, which is writing and publishing, the depression never went away. Mm-hmm. Like nothing happened with it. It was never treated. It was never diagnosed. I knew I was depressed, and I thought like, okay, well, I know I'm depressed, so I know I can deal with it. And that's not how that works. When I finally started college again, it was in my hometown, Murfreesboro, and I actually started using campus resources for counseling and medication, and that didn't help. My 20s had ups and downs, but for nearly a decade, I suffered constant low-grade depression. I never really fit in anywhere. I said I went to school for a year on a cycling scholarship. They gave me tuition money to race my bike, and that was an amazing experience. I was bad at it. I started binge drinking when I was there. I did not make friends on the team, and that was my fault. I finished my year at that school, and I did not go back to school the next year. I didn't plan on finishing college. I just kind of planned to drift. I did not care about my credit score. I did not care about a degree. I did not care about a career. I was happy to just float. I was debt free because I got the scholarship, and I was aimless, and that was fine. The decade of my 20s was marked by personal tragedy. I lost both of my grandparents with whom I lived for years. When my mother went back to school, eventually she went to seminary, and I moved in with my grandparents when I was 16. So I lived with them from the time I was 15 until basically my grandmother died in 2011. I lived with them from basically 2001 to where are we? I don't know. I lived with I lived with them for 6 or 7 years. I started drinking more heavily. It went from being like, a fun, like, let's go out and get drunk thing to, drinking just during the week by myself. I was working mostly manual labor or service oriented jobs. I was a cashier at a liquor store.
I did not know this either.
I was a cashier at a liquor store for a long time.
You never told me this.
Yeah. I worked for my neighbor who was a contractor for a while. I did the industrial valves. Basically, I didn't give a shit. If it didn't pay well, I didn't care. I just wanted to not be hassled. It was also a time of positive changes. I actually published a lot more short stories from that time. From the time I published my first one until I had my daughter, I think it was something like 12 short stories published.
Jeez, I did not know that.
And I got nominated for an award. That was cool. It doesn't mean anything.
It does. Don't downplay yourself.
But also, later in my 20s, that's when Anna and I had our daughter. We got married, and then I went back to school and I started a career. The entire reason I went back to school was because I found out we were having our daughter. And I realized I could fuck up my own life as much as I could fuck around and not make any money, and that's fine. Something about the responsibility of having a child, I realized, well, I got to get my shit together for this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, by the time we had our daughter, I had seen multiple therapists and counselors, and I tried, when I have to fill out the list of all the medications I've tried for like psychiatrists, there's like a dozen on there that I've tried that did not work. The result of most of them was chronic depression and suicidal ideation. The amount of medication that increased suicidal ideation for me, through the roof, like nearly all of them. They really did not do anything to help the depression. The thought of suicide was literally a constant, and I thought everyone thought about suicide as much as I did. Even when things were going well and I felt happy or thought I was happy, the intrusive thoughts or the call of the void just kept winning out over all the positives. And my response to having depression was similar to many people's. I just asked myself, what do I have to be depressed about? Thoughts of suicide were so common, I seriously thought they were something that I just had to ignore. I thought everybody thought like that, and they just persisted. And there's a misunderstanding about major depressive disorder and suicide, and that is that they are unjustified given a person's circumstances. Could you be depressed with $1 billion and everything you ever dreamed of? The answer, Luke, obviously is
yes.
Even with $1 billion,
no, I know,
the depression would not go away. Do you have $1 billion?
Unfortunately not.
But it wouldn't make the hole in your heart any less holy.
Unfortunately, the depression would still be there.
The hole in your heart would be just as black, even with $1 billion. You could probably afford some pretty good therapy and really good drugs, but it'd still be there. Happens all the time. Successful comedians, though not most of them billionaires, are perhaps the best example of this phenomenon. Imagine booking movies, signing million-dollar deals for television shows, selling out auditoriums, receiving awards and screen time for being successful at making others laugh, and still fighting the chronic feeling of being less than, undeserving, or a failure. But try explaining that to someone who doesn't or hasn't experienced a mental health crisis or chronic conditions. You'll be met with disbelief at best and ridicule at worst. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Be thankful for what you have. Life isn't that bad. You know, that kind of invalidation.
Those statements just, they pain me.
Do you have personal experience with those? Who has told you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Or who has told you that life isn't that bad? Or what do you have to be sad about?
Myself. Mainly myself, but
are
also some people I interact with on a very often basis.
Your family?
No.
Oh, good. Thank God.
No, my mother is a nurse, so she knows that she will be met with resistance when she tells me to get my head out of my ass and pull myself up by my bootstraps.
Well, so tell me, if you want to, tell me about the people who have told you these things.
Well, I mean, it's people that aren't really open to the whole concept of mental health and are not necessarily raised with that awareness or willingness to be open to it, if that makes sense. I don't necessarily want to say they have old opinions, but they're of a different generation. Let's put it that way is the best way to look at it and still be respectful about it.
Okay, boomer.
I'm not going to say okay, boomer, but I mean, it's of a very,
there is a mindset.
I'm trying to tiptoe around and being respectful about this.
That's fair.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. And there is that older mindset. And I in the episodes that I did with my sister, she mentioned that, you know, her father's girlfriend at the time shared with her that she was abused and that she just got over it.
Yeah.
And that is a very common reaction, I think, to people who are not familiar with mental health issues, especially acute mental health crises, where it seems like, you know, hey, life sucks for everybody. You know, we're all dealing with it. And, you know, look at us, we're fine. Yeah. Except if you look at rates of, you know, alcoholism, drug abuse, especially opioids, it's obvious that people are not dealing with it.
They're not fine.
They're not. The people are not okay.
And I'll be honest with some of my family has kind of had that mentality of just suck it up until you actually break it down for them and explain how you're feeling, what you're doing, and mainly what you're thinking. And soon as you tell them, well, I thought about driving off the road doing 80. And they're like, oh, shit, this ain't good.
I do not have those thoughts. Interesting. You might have a problem.
Tell me more.
Or less, I'm afraid. I don't like these feelings that I am unfamiliar with.
And they're just like, you want to like keep us in the loop about this? And I'm like, yeah, actually, yeah, I'm okay. I'm telling you now, but earlier, no.
I'll get into this a little bit later, but there is something so freeing to be open. There's something so freeing about being open about mental health that people often find disarming or charming. It just depends on who the audience is. So all this time I tried to just deal with depression on my own. And for a long time, it was mostly manageable until I hit my 30s. I had started an actual career, but the pay was horrible. Luke, do you know how much money, how much I made per year for my first job out of college?
Is this working for the guy with the Bentley?
No.
Or is this working for the company where you let the plumber?
Yep, that's the one.
We don't have to fill in the concrete.
Yeah, all right. So
I'm gonna go with $35K.
$30K.
Damn, I was
biggest fuck up of my career was letting a plumber backfill a trench. No, letting a concrete guy backfill a trench with a plumbing waistline in it before it had been tested and approved by the city. We had to spend thousands of dollars to do a smoke test on it.
Sorry, not trying to out you there.
Definitely, we've all fucked up.
Oh,
So yeah, I was a superintendent first, then I was a commercial project manager, and then I thought, I have a master's degree. I do have this experience. I see what other contractors are making. And, there's that joke like, oh, we pay that guy. He shows up in a nice truck. You're like, oh, we pay this contractor too much. He drives too nice of a truck.
Yeah.
You familiar with that? Okay. I had that mentality. So I thought I could.
That's called leveraging your debt.
Yeah. So I thought I could do better on my own. So I started a company. And for anybody who's listened to the first season of this podcast, yes, the host of the podcast all about the horrors of capitalism is himself a failed capitalist. Did I turn against capitalism because I failed? That's not an exact portrait of reality. I turned against capitalism because it taught me exactly how brutal it is, how exploitative and corrupt it is. I was a state-licensed general contractor. I built houses, I did full-scale remodels, I did single-room remodels, additions, renovations, you name it, and the work itself was fine. I like construction work. As an employer, I held myself to a pretty high standard. I paid very well. I did not have any time off limitations. I did fuel reimbursements. And I made sure to always, always, always pay my employees on time. I put my employees first, and I will always be proud of that. We also did excellent work. And by that, I mean my employees were excellent craftsmen. I would go out of my way on Fridays if I had been if I had been late writing the checks, I would drive to their houses and drop off their checks if I hadn't been able to make it to the job site.
Because I might be the most accommodating boss I've ever met.
I was 100% against my guys going
over the weekend without the money they earned.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you were paying on a weekly basis, right?
Yep.
Jeez.
Yeah. So that
nobody does that.
Well, yeah.
Not enough.
The problem, Luke, as you might be able to guess, was money and time and stress. I spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week working. Even if I took a day off, it wasn't a day off. I was just doing more work over the phone. I spent my time invoicing, submitting payment applications to bank escrow accounts, which, God bless, is a whole fucking thing, preparing estimates, ordering materials, meeting with new customers, and making sure paychecks were ready. I did not have time to do anything else. And as you might be able to tell by this podcast, I love doing things that are not my actual job. I love my projects and my hobbies. I love research and writing, but I wasn't doing any of that. I did not feel like myself. And I realized late one night that one of my projects was falling behind on budget, like significantly. And I decided to pay for the overages out of pocket instead of going back to the customer for an extra $30,000. My thinking was that I was responsible for the errors, so I should just absorb them. Long story short, that $30,000 turned into $90,000 pretty quickly. In about a year, I went from normal cash flow, always in the black, to deep, deep red. I maxed out all my company credit cards. I took out a large predatory commercial loan, which you think consumer commercial loans, like payday loans, you think those are bad? Commercial loans are worse.
Wait, so how exactly does that work?
Okay.
Do you get that from a bank or do you get it from a third party?
You get it from a third party.
Oh, shit. Yeah, you fucked up.
Problem. Yeah. What I should have done from the very beginning was take out a line of credit from my bank when they offered it. That would have been the thing to do.
So get it early and just kind of work it off.
Get it early, have it available if I needed it. What I did was I waited until I needed it and I was desperate, and I found a company that was willing to lend me $20,000, and I took it.
With what interest?
Yes. All the interest. You name it, they charged it. And it wasn't just that. They actually, the way that you repaid it was with
blood.
Essentially, they actually took daily withdrawals from my account every day. So they paid me, and the payments started back, like, I think the next month. Every day they started withdrawing money from my account. So even if I'm
confused how they had access to do these withdrawals.
Well, it's a predatory loan, so you have to give them your bank information.
Routing number, account number, everything.
Yep.
So they can run it.
Yep.
So they can take over what you gave them.
Yep.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's screwed up.
That is screwed up.
I didn't even realize commercial quote unquote payday loans were a thing.
Yes. I sent out invoices ahead of schedule, which not a good idea. I delayed payments to suppliers and subcontractors by months, trying to buy time. Not good. Did not run my company well, Luke.
Yeah, that'll
do it.
That'll send it south.
In October of 2018, my company was almost $100,000 in debt in spite of doing nearly $800,000 of invoicing. I had not paid myself in months. We had a mortgage, bills, groceries. My wife essentially paid for all of it. I kept the financial problems a secret. I drank a lot. I smoked a lot of weed. It got to the point where I would drop my daughter off at school, go home and drink malt liquor, take a long nap, and then wake up sober and on time to pick my daughter up from school. This did not last very long. In the run-up to my descent into the deepest pit of hell, I took apart the front suspension on my truck and reassembled it, trying to repair it while drunk. I had some spare parts left over, and I did not think a thing about it until I was on the interstate and the tie rod came off and I crashed across 4 lanes of traffic into a guardrail. I was sober when I crashed, but I put the truck back together drunk.
Thank God you were sober.
Yeah. Luckily, I was alone, and I was about 5 minutes ahead of rush hour traffic. I am not shitting you. I was on Briley Parkway, and I'm not even kidding.
Would you go left to right or right to left?
I hit the median to the left, and then I jumped across all 4 lanes and hit the steel barrier. No cars around. And I'm not even shitting you. 5 minutes later, hundreds of cars going by. Rush hour traffic right then. I missed it by 5 minutes.
That was the universe watching out for you right there.
What I proceeded to do after that was I had I was actually right next to Opry Mills. And, they have that German beer garden over there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had the cop was like, you want me to drive you anywhere? I was like, yeah, could you take me to Opry Mills? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I called my friend. And I was like, hey, can you pick me up at Opry Mills? And he was like, yeah, I'm probably about, hour and a half, 2 hours away. I was like, perfect. I'm going to get drunk. I didn't have anything else to do. I had just wrecked my truck. And I was like, I'm going to drink 3 liters of beer at the bar.
A couple steins.
And actually, this is important because this actually planted a seed in my brain while I was there. Yeah, I know. Bear with me.
The drunken beer garden seed.
Yeah. So I'm sitting at the bar and I'm drinking 5 liters of beer, 6 liters, whatever it is.
Gone from 3 to 5.
I don't remember how much I drank, but as we're sitting there, as I'm sitting there alone and I get something to eat, it's one of my favorite meals. I can't remember what it is. It's Laborwurst. I'm sitting there eating and drinking, and I overhear these 2 ladies talking, and one of them says, well, yeah, they ran all these wires and then they they didn't do anything with it. And so now we can't get the system online. And that was what I heard. And then I heard another part of their conversation saying, well, yeah, the CEO said this needed to open then, and we're now like 3 weeks behind. We're losing revenue. And I'm listening, and I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, I used to be a commercial project manager, and I turned around, I was like, I said, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm a contractor, and I'm trying to figure out what assembly you're talking, like what are you what wires, like what, and they're like, oh, well, we work for a hospital, and these are access control doors.
Oh,
yeah. And spoiler alert, Luke and I work in healthcare construction. And when she said that, I was like, I never even thought about hospitals.
Did they work for us?
No, they did not. I think they worked for HCA.
Oh, okay.
But that was like, so when they said that, I was like, that is a fascinating field of construction that they're talking so fluently about this very specific part of construction. And just as a contractor, it stuck out to me.
I would like to point out this is a very, very, very small part.
I went to the German beer house. I got drunk and I waited for my friend to pick me up.
Also, I'd like to point out you told me that story, but you never led up with all of this.
Yeah.
You told me the story like 3 weeks into meeting me.
So, Luke, that was the beginning of a very quick downward spiral. So a couple of weeks later, we own a house, and while removing wallpaper, we're doing renovations. You have like a scoring tool. It's like almost like a hockey puck with a bunch of teeth on it, and you roll it around, then you spray the stuff on the wallpaper, and it peels it off. So I'm spraying this stuff on the wallpaper, and I'm scoring it, and we have like a steam tool, and I'm doing this, and I've got this old glue all over me, and I'm in the middle of removing wallpaper, and it was like a really strange calm washed over me. I calmly set down my tools, I walked into my bedroom closet, and I hanged myself with a belt. I sent a long text to a friend, I cried, and then I shut the door, and everything went dark. obviously I'm alive, so I need to rewind a bit. A few years prior, when I still worked in an office, I would come home on my lunch break when no one was home, and I would sit on my bed with my gun in my mouth. And this is not healthy. This is not what healthy, happy people do. And I did it enough that it started to worry me. I would come home on my lunch break, and I would do this regularly.
So like a weekly thing.
Yeah. And so I would put the gun back in the safe, and I would collect myself, and then I would go back to work, and then I would pick my daughter up from school. And one day my daughter comes home from school with a little note that she made for me, and it said, "I love Daddy this much." And it had a stick figure with her arms stretched from one edge of the page to the other. And the last time I put the gun back into the safe, I put that drawing on top of it. So the next time I came home on lunch break, I opened the safe and I saw the drawing, and I closed the safe and went back to work. And the drawing worked. So I'm in the dark in the closet, and I've just sent this long text to my friend telling him to call my wife and tell her not to go home. The belt is around my neck. I lose consciousness, and there is like this wild kaleidoscope of light and colors and darkness that happens when you asphyxiate. And it's like seeing everything all at once, but also it's totally dark. And there is this weird liminal space of darkness and light. And the thing that I saw clearly was that drawing that my daughter made that said, "I love Daddy this much," with arms spread wide. And that woke me up. And I opened my eyes, and I was gasping, and my phone was ringing. And I don't know how long had passed, maybe a minute, 5 seconds. I have no idea, but I know I should be dead. And the person calling me was my friend who I texted, Sean. He got the text, and then he just started immediately calling me. That was October 20th, 2018. And since that day, I have not smoked weed or had alcohol. I was admitted to a psych hospital for 9 days, while my business basically crumbled. It takes years to build connections, establish routine and order, and apparently it only takes 9 days to tank a business. And Luke, that's where we're going to pause on this episode. We're going to come back for episode 2 next week.